Okay, now that we have the PG admin with us, let us create a new database. This will be a test database. To create this database, we will go to the databases option, right click on it and click on the create database option. We'll just give a name to this database, which will be test, and we will save this database. Once this database is created, we will get a notification saying database connected. So the database is now connected and we have a new database. Within this database, we can add tables, but since this is a test database, we'll look at how to delete this database also. We'll just right click on this database and click on the delete option. Okay. This we saw is the graphical way of doing this. We can also create a database using SQL queries, but that we will not be covering right now. We'll start with creating a new database which we will be using for writing further queries, and we will be adding tables and data into that database. So let's create a database called training. The second line is the owner. This is the user which is creating this database. There are other users also to whom you can give special rights to access their database. We'll be learning about creating different users and assigning them rights in the later part of this course. For now, the owner is the sole user that we have for this database, which is Postgres. Save it. Now you can see that training database is created. In this database, next what we will do is add tables. So this training database is going to be a database of customers and products and the transactions that those customers are doing. So we'll have three different tables in this database. First will be of customers, which will contain customer data. Second will be of products, which will contain product data. And third will be of the transactions. So for example, customer A is buying product B. So the third table will have information like customer A bought this much quantity of product B for this much amount. So we'll create these three tables and add data to it. So to create a table, we'll be using create table command. So before writing this command, let's look at the syntax and example of this command. So when we are creating a table, it is important that we design it very carefully. A better designed table will be taking up only required space and it will be quick in giving back the response to queries. So to create a table using the create command, we'll need to name the table and also give the names of all the columns and their data types. If you look at the syntax of this command, this starts with create table. After that, you mention the name of that table, and after that, we have a bracket. Within this bracket, you will mention all the columns. For each column, you need to mention the data type which this column will contain. We will be discussing these data types in the later part of the course. Next part is defining column constraints. This I have put in square brackets as it is optional. You need not give all the constraints while defining the table. So you list down all the columns, give the table constraints if any, you close the command using a semicolon. When writing a query, you can have any number of spaces. These spaces are immaterial. You can use multiple lines, so you can press enter after any word. And it is very important that you close the query using a semicolon. You need not remember this. When you practice writing queries, this will become your habit. While writing a query, there are some good practices. For example, some developers write all the keywords in capital letters. It is not mandatory. You need not write create table in capital letters. So just to segregate and make it more readable, you can keep all the SQL commands as capital and others as normal case. Now we will look at what all constraints are available to be put on the columns. Majorly there are these 6 types of constraints. First is not null. If you define any column to be not null, it cannot have blank value, it cannot be null. So this check will ensure that whichever column is mandatory for you, while entering data, you do not miss out that value. If you miss that value, while storing the data, it will give you back an error. Default constraint can be defined to store a default value if any input value is missing for that particular cell. Unique constraint will ensure that that particular cell has a unique value within that column. Using the check constraint, you can specify a certain criteria against which the data inputted will be checked. Last two are the key constraints. You can specify any column to be a primary key or a foreign key. Let us look at these two types of keys. A primary key is a column or set of columns which makes the values in a table unique. Primary key therefore ensures that there are no duplicate records in the database. If there are more than two columns used as a primary key, it is called a composite key. Foreign key is usually a column that references another column of another table. Let us look at this from an example. So suppose we have one table which is a customer table and it is storing customer ID, customer's first name and customer's last name. We define customer ID to be primary key to identify each individual customer. Customer ID will not be duplicate. Each customer will have only one customer ID. Now in the second table, which is the order table and contains the description of all the orders that we are getting, order ID is the primary key. For each individual order, we will have one unique order ID. But the customer ID is a foreign key. What this means is this column will have values which are available only in the customer ID column of the customer table. It will not have any other value. So this foreign key column is related to the primary key of the customer table, and it is restricting the values in this column by the superset of values in the customer ID of customer table. So if you can imagine the values in the order table, there will be several orders which will have same customer ID. So if the same customer is ordering different products, for that order, the customer ID will be same. So the primary key of orders will be unique, but the foreign key will be having duplicate values within a table. So having duplicate values for foreign key is allowed, but it is not allowed for primary key. Secondly, when you want to find out first name and last name of a particular customer with a particular order ID. So for example, if I want to find out the customer who ordered with the order ID 1, I'll see the customer ID of the customer in the orders table, and then I'll find out what is the first name and last name of that customer with that particular customer ID in the customer table. So this is the concept of keys. It is very important to specify which will be your primary key and which will be your foreign key. With this information, let us now create the first table, the customer table in our database. To create a table, we'll start writing the SQL query. If you remember how we got this screen, we right-clicked on the database and selected the query tool. So right-click on the training database and select the query tool. So this is where we'll write the query. We'll start writing create table. Create table is the command. After this, we will specify the table name, which is customer table. After this, we will start a bracket. And within this bracket, we will list down all the columns. First is the cust ID. Then we write data type, which will be integer, int. And next will be comma, next column, first name. This will have variable characters, varchar. Last name as again variable characters. Then we'll have age, integer. Then we will have email ID, and this variable characters. That's all. So we'll close the bracket and remember to put semicolon to finish this query. To run this query, you'll need to either click on this button, which is execute refresh, or you can see that F5 is also highlighted. You can just click on F5 to execute the query. Here you can see that query returned successfully in 172 seconds. So your query has run. To see the table, open the database, go to schemas, within public. Inside these tables, you'll be able to see a table, but if it is not refreshed, click on refresh first. There will be one table created, which is the customer table. If you want to look at the columns also, if you open the customer table, if you click on this plus sign, there's the columns option, customer ID, first name, last name, age, email ID. These are the 5 columns that we created.